Chapter 1. The Sound of Water. The stream behind Elira's home moved differently depending on the season. During heavy rain, it became restless, pushing against stones and roots as if trying to escape the forest entirely. In the winter, it slowed and darkened beneath thin layers of ice that cracked softly during the mornings. But during the middle of spring, when the wind carried the smell of wet bark and growing grass through the trees, the water settled into a steady rhythm that almost sounded like breathing. Elira liked this season the most. She sat quietly in the old wooden bench beside the stream with one leg folded beneath her, watching the current move around a cluster of smooth stones near the opposite bank. Small leaves drifted across the surface one at a time, turning slowly as they passed through the reflected light of the afternoon sky. The forest was calm today. Somewhere deeper among the trees, the birds called to one another in uneven intervals. The distant creaking of a water wheel echoed faintly from further downhill where one of the older mill houses still operated beside the river road. She listened for a while without moving. Most people found silence uncomfortable. Elira never understood why. Silence always felt full to her, not empty. There were patterns hidden inside quiet places if someone sat still long enough to notice them. The stream changed shape every time it touched a stone. Wind altered the movement of branches before reaching the ground. Even sunlight behaved differently depending on the moisture in the air. Things were always moving, always changing. Most people simply did not pay attention long enough to see it. Elira rested her chin against her hand and watched a droplet of water fall from a bent leaf overhead. It landed in the stream and vanished instantly. She frowned slightly. Where did the shape of the droplet go after that? The water still existed. The stream carried it somewhere, but the droplet itself disappeared the moment it touched the surface of the water. She wondered if everything in the world was like that. Separate things becoming larger things separating again. A branch becoming firewood becoming heat disappearing into the air. Nothing truly vanished. It only changed form. The thought stayed with her for a while. Then her stomach growled softly. Elira blinked once and looked toward the house behind her. Oh, she murmured quietly to herself. She had forgotten to eat again. The small home stood only a short distance away beneath the trees. Built beside the stream where the ground flattened near the forest edge, moss climbed along parts of the stone foundation, and pale green vines wrapped around the wooden supports near the roof. Thin smoke no longer rose from the chimney. The fire inside had probably gone out hours ago. She stood slowly from the bench and brushed loose strands of silver-white hair behind one ear before walking back toward the house. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath her steps once she entered. Inside the home smelled faintly of dried herbs, old books, and cooled ash from the stove. Warm light filtered through the windows in narrow bands across the room. Everything was where she left it, mostly. A folded blanket rested over the chair near the fireplace. Several dried flowers hung upside down near the kitchen shelves. A kettle sat near the stove waiting to be used. Elira moved quietly through the room out of habit more than necessity. Living alone taught a person strange things. Eventually you stop making noise for people who are no longer there. She crouched near the storage cabinet and opened it carefully. Rice, dried roots, tea leaves, a small jar of salt. but the herbs she needed were missing. Elira stared silently into the cabinet for several seconds, as though the ingredients might appear if she waited long enough. They did not. A quiet sigh escaped her. She closed the cabinet slowly and leaned back against it while thinking. The meal she planned to make was simple. Her mother used to prepare it during colder evenings when the rain kept them indoors for days at a time. Warm broth with mountain herbs, soft root vegetables, and crushed grain dumplings. Nothing complicated. But it was difficult to make properly without the herbs. She glanced toward the window. The town was not far. If she left now, she could return before sunset. Still, the thought alone made her shoulders tense slightly. The town was always loud compared to the forest. Not truly loud, just crowded. Too many conversations happening at once. Too many eyes. Too many moments where someone expected her to speak before she had enough time to think. People often misunderstood her silences. Some assumed she disliked them. Others thought she was distracted or rude. A few simply believed she was strange. Elira lowered her gaze toward the floorboards. Maybe they were right. Most people did not spend their entire afternoons watching water move around rocks. Most people did not forget meals because they became distracted thinking about how plants carried moisture upward through their stems. Most people did not ask questions nobody else cared about. She pulled her knees slightly closer to herself. I wish, she began quietly, before stopping. The room remained silent. After a moment, she looked back toward the cabinet. I wish there was a way to make it without leaving. A soft breeze moved through the open window behind her, disturbing several loose papers resting on the nearby table. Elira watched them shift slightly before settling again. Then she stood. No point in thinking about it, she said to herself. She gathered her satchel from beside the door and tied her cloak loosely around her shoulders before stepping back outside. The forest path leading toward town curved gently downhill beside the stream. Wildflowers grew thick along parts of the trail, and sunlight flickered through the moving leaves overhead as the wind passed through the branches. Elira relaxed almost immediately once she began walking. The further she moved from town, the easier it always became to breathe. A rabbit darted briefly across the path ahead before disappearing into the undergrowth. She smiled faintly. The forest never demanded anything from her. It simply existed. The same could not always be said for people. As she continued down the trail, the trees slowly began thinning, replaced by wider roads and scattered homes built close together. The smell of wood smoke drifted through the air, alongside the distant sound of turning mill wheels and conversation. The town appeared gradually beyond the hillside. Stone roads, timbered buildings, cloth banners moving in the wind, merchants speaking beneath shaded stalls. People moved constantly here. Workers carrying lumber, children running between market stands, travelers arriving beside overloaded carts, pulled by broad-backed horses. Elira paused briefly near the entrance road before continuing forward. She adjusted the strap of her satchel unconsciously. Nobody was even looking at her. Yet the feeling remained anyway. The herb shop sat near the eastern side of town, beside a bakery that always smelled faintly of sweet grain and butter. Bundles of drying plants hung outside beneath the awning, shifting softly in the breeze. When Elira entered, a bell near the doorway chimed. The woman behind the counter looked up immediately. "Well," she said warmly, "I was beginning to think the forest had decided to keep you this time." Elira blinked once before offering a small nod. "I was busy." "You're always busy." The woman smiled, organizing several small jars near the shelves behind her. Mira had owned the herb shop for longer than Elira could remember. She spoke easily with everyone who entered, including people who clearly wished she wouldn't. Oddly enough, Elira never minded speaking with her. Maybe because Mira never forced the conversation when silence happened. "What are you missing this time?" Mira asked. "Mountain sage," Elira replied quietly. "A river leaf, if you still have some." Mira raised an eyebrow slightly. "Cooking?" Elira hesitated. "Maybe." "That means yes." She disappeared briefly back into the back room before returning with several wrapped bundles tied neatly with thin cord. "Elira?" Elira looked up. "You should come into town more often." The statement was gentle, not judgmental. Still, Elira looked away slightly. "It's quieter at home." Mira smiled softly. "I know." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mira placed the herbs carefully onto the counter. "The usual price?" Elira handed over the coins before placing the herbs into her satchel. As she turned toward the door, Mira called after her. "The roads might get muddy tonight. Looks like rain." Elira paused briefly before nodding once more. Then she stepped back outside into the afternoon light. The forest path waited beyond the edge of town. And for reasons she could never fully explain, she already missed it.